Hello and welcome. Today, we set sail into the dangerous waters of the Golden Age of Piracy, a time when the seas were ruled by fearless captains and notorious outlaws. From the late 1600s to the early 1700s, pirates like Blackbeard and Bonny and Calico Jack carved their names into history, striking fear into merchant ships and coastal towns alike. This was an age not only of treasure and plunder, but also of unique pirate codes and hidden havens where these outlaws thrived. Join me as we whisper through the legends of the Golden Age of Piracy, uncovering the tales of pirate havens, famous captains, and the treasures they sought. Together, we'll explore the rise and fall of the most feared and celebrated pirates of the seas. Pirate havens, the safe harbors of the Caribbean. During the Golden Age of Piracy, the seas were not just the battlefields where pirates sought wealth and infamy, they were also home to hidden havens, secret strongholds where these outlaws could rest, repair, and rebuild. These pirate havens, especially in the Caribbean, were essential for the survival of pirate crews, offering them places to hide from the authorities, trade their plundered goods, and live freely outside the reach of European powers. One of the most famous pirate havens was Nassau, located on the island of New Providence in the Bahamas. By the early 18th century, Nassau had become a lawless stronghold, attracting pirates from all corners of the world. Its natural harbors and proximity to major shipping routes made it the perfect base for launching raids on Spanish, British, and French ships. Pirates like Blackbeard, Charles Vane, and Benjamin Hornigold made Nassau their home, ruling over it as an independent pirate republic. Nassau was more than just a hideout, it was a bustling pirate city, where taverns and markets thrived, stolen goods were traded openly, and pirate crews plotted their neck-staring adventures. Nassau's reputation as a pirate haven was further cemented by its lack of effective governance. At a time when the British government had little control over the island, pirates were able to live and operate freely without fear of prosecution. Pirate captains like Hornigold even established loose alliances, creating a community where pirates shared resources, repaired their ships, and recruited new crew members. The pirate haven operated under its own code of conduct, known as the Pirate Code, which emphasized equality among the crew, shared responsibility, and democratic decision-making. This self-governed society was in stark contrast to the hierarchical and often oppressive naval regimes of the time. Another major pirate haven was Tortuga, an island off the northern coast of Hispaniola. Tortuga became a haven for the buccaneers, a group of pirates and privateers who preyed on Spanish ships and settlements. Tortuga's location, surrounded by treacherous reefs and rocky shores, made it nearly impossible for large naval fleets to approach. This natural defense allowed the buccaneers to fortify the island and create a thriving pirate community. The island was notorious for its wild, lawless atmosphere, where pirates and mercenaries mingled in taverns and brothels, spending their loot as quickly as they plundered it. Buccaneers were originally hunters, known for smoking wild game, boucan, but by the 17th century, they had turned to piracy. From Tortuga, they launched attacks on the Spanish Main, targeting the rich treasure fleets that carried gold and silver from the Americas to Europe. These buccaneers were feared for their ruthless tactics, often employing guerrilla-style warfare to strike swiftly and disappear into the maze of islands and coves that dotted the Caribbean. One of the most infamous pirate havens of the time was Port Royal in Jamaica. Before it was destroyed by a devastating earthquake in 1692, Port Royal was known as the wickedest city on earth. This bustling port was a hub for pirate activity, where privateers and pirates alike could sell their stolen goods, recruit crew members, and enjoy the spoils of their raids. The city's wealth and notoriety were built on piracy, with merchants and corrupt officials turning a blind eye to the illegal activities in exchange for a share of the profits. Taverns, gambling houses, and brothels flourished in Port Royal, making it a wild, dangerous, and irresistible place for pirates seeking to spend their fortunes. These pirate havens were not just hideouts, they were vital economic and social centers for pirates. In these cities, pirates could repair their ships, restock supplies, and trade their loot. The local economies of places like Nassau, Tortuga, and Port Royal thrived on pirate activity, with merchants, smugglers, and local officials often cooperating with the pirates in exchange for wealth. Pirates could sell plundered goods to eager buyers, while local businesses benefited from the influx of money and goods. These havens also allowed pirates to maintain a degree of independence, living by their own rules and codes in a world where lawlessness was the norm. The geography of the Caribbean, with its countless islands, hidden coves, and shallow waters, made it an ideal region for piracy. The pirates knew the seas intimately, using the region's natural defenses to evade capture and strike at unsuspecting ships. The narrow channels, reefs, and mangroves provided perfect hiding spots for pirate ships, allowing them to lie in wait for merchant vessels or escape from pursuing naval forces. This geographic advantage, combined with the chaotic political climate of the time, helped make the Caribbean the perfect breeding ground for piracy. However, the golden age of these pirate havens would not last forever. By the early 18th century, European powers had begun to recognize the threat that piracy posed to their economic interests, and they launched coordinated efforts to stamp it out. Nassau, once a thriving pirate republic, fell to British forces under Woodes Rogers, who was appointed as governor with the specific mission of ending piracy in the Bahamas. Tortuga and Port Royal also saw their pirate populations diminish as naval forces increased their presence in the Caribbean, and many pirates were hunted down, captured, or forced to flee. The loss of these pirate havens marked the beginning of the end for the Golden Age of Piracy. Without safe harbors, pirates found it increasingly difficult to operate, and many were forced to abandon their way of life. The era of lawless freedom that had once thrived in the Caribbean came to a close, leaving behind stories of adventure, rebellion, and hidden treasure that still captivate our imaginations today. Famous pirates, Blackbeard, and Bonny, and more. The Golden Age of Piracy produced some of the most infamous and legendary figures to ever sail the seas. These pirates, with their bold actions and larger-than-life personalities, have become the stuff of legend, capturing the imaginations of people for centuries. While many pirates terrorize the oceans, a few names stand out as the most feared, admired, and iconic of their time. Perhaps the most notorious of them all was Blackbeard, whose real name was Edward Teach, or Thatch. Blackbeard's fearsome reputation was not just a result of his ruthless tactics, but also his terrifying appearance. He was known for tying slow-burning fuses into his thick black beard, lighting them before battle to create a hellish image of smoke and flames around his face, making him appear almost supernatural. Blackbeard's flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, was a heavily armed warship that struck fear into the hearts of sailors across the Caribbean and the American colonies. His reign of terror lasted only a few short years, but in that time he became a symbol of pirate power and brutality. Blackbeard met his end in 1718 in a fierce battle against British naval forces off the coast of North Carolina. His death, however, only added to his legend, solidifying his place as the most iconic pirate of the era. Another well-known pirate, and Bonny, defied the norms of her time by becoming one of the few female pirates to make a name for herself. Born in Ireland around 1700, and was known for her fiery temper and fearless nature. She sailed alongside the pirate Calico Jack, with whom she had a romantic relationship, and became infamous for her bravery in battle. And often dressed as a man while aboard pirate ships, fighting alongside the male crew members and proving herself to be just as capable, if not more so, than many of her male counterparts. And Bonny's story is also closely tied to that of Mary Read, another female pirate who joined Calico Jack's crew. The two women, disguised as men, fought together and earned the respect of their fellow pirates. Both and Mary were eventually captured by British authorities, but their stories of daring and defiance live on in pirate lore. Calico Jack Rackham, and Bonny's partner, was another famous pirate of the Golden Age. Known for his flashy clothing and bold tactics, Calico Jack is remembered as much for his personality as for his pirate career. He is perhaps most famous for the design of the Jolly Roger flag, a skull with crossed swords that has since become the universal symbol of piracy. Although his career as a pirate was relatively short, lasting from 1718 to 1720, Calico Jack's legacy endures, particularly because of his connection with Bonny and Mary Read. He was captured and executed in 1720, but the story of his adventures and the women who fought alongside him remains a key part of pirate history. One of the most successful pirates in terms of wealth and power was Bartholomew Roberts, also known as Blackbeard. Unlike many pirates who operated in the Caribbean, Roberts focused his raids on the waters off West Africa, capturing over 400 ships during his pirate career. He was known for his cunning and ruthlessness, and unlike many pirates, Roberts maintained a sense of discipline aboard his ships. He was also deeply superstitious and often avoided alcohol, which set him apart from the typical image of a hard-drinking pirate. Roberts' strict code of conduct and exceptional success made him one of the most feared pirates of his time, but like many before him, his career ended in battle. He was killed in 1722 during a fight with the Royal Navy, marking the end of one of the most profitable pirate careers in history. Other notable pirates include Henry Morgan, a privateer who became one of the most famous figures of the Caribbean, Stede Bonnet, known as the gentleman pirate for his unusual background as a wealthy landowner who turned to piracy, and Charles Vane, a particularly brutal pirate who gained a reputation for his violent tactics. Each of these figures added their own chapter to the story of piracy during the Golden Age, contributing to the myths and legends that continue to fascinate us today. These pirates were more than just outlaws, they were adventurers, rebels, and in some cases, even leaders of democratic communities on the high seas. They lived by their own rules, created their own societies, and defied the powers that sought to control them. Their stories, full of daring raids, hidden treasures, and dramatic battles, continue to capture our imaginations, ensuring that the legends of the Golden Age of Piracy live on. Pirate ships and flags, symbols of terror on the seas. During the Golden Age of Piracy, a pirate's ship was more than just a vessel for travel. It was their most important tool, their home, and a symbol of their power on the open seas. Pirate ships were the heart of a pirate's operation, carefully selected, modified, and outfitted to strike terror into the hearts of merchant ships and naval fleets alike. But just as important as the ships themselves were the flags they flew, menacing symbols designed to provoke fear and ensure swift surrender from their targets. Pirates were strategic in their choice of ships. Many opted for sloops, schooners, or brigantines, fast, maneuverable vessels that could easily outrun larger, more heavily armed ships. These smaller ships could navigate shallow waters and escape through narrow channels, giving pirates an advantage in the Caribbean and along the American coast. Speed was crucial for pirates. It allowed them to catch up to merchant vessels and retreat quickly when pursued by warships. Unlike the slow, heavily laden merchant ships they often targeted, pirate ships were light and swift, built for raiding and escaping without delay. One of the most feared pirate ships of the era was Blackbeard's Queen Anne's Revenge, a former French slave ship that Blackbeard captured and modified to suit his needs. The ship was heavily armed with 40 cannons, making it a floating fortress capable of taking on multiple enemy ships at once. Blackbeard used the Queen Anne's Revenge to blockade the port of Charleston, South Carolina, in 1718, demanding ransom from the town's inhabitants in exchange for their safety. The ship became a symbol of Blackbeard's dominance on the seas, and its massive size and firepower struck fear into the hearts of all who encountered it. But a pirate's ship alone wasn't enough to instill fear. The flag that flew from its mast was equally important. The most iconic of all pirate symbols was the Jolly Roger, the skull and crossbones or skull with crossed swords on a black background. This flag was more than just decoration, it was a psychological weapon. Pirates knew that most merchant ships would surrender without a fight if they believed they were facing brutal and merciless opponents. The Jolly Roger signaled to captains and crews that they had two options: surrender immediately or face certain death. The origin of the term Jolly Roger is somewhat unclear, but it may have derived from the French term Jolie Rouge, meaning pretty red, referring to the blood-red flags some pirates used. These red flags were even more terrifying than the black Jolly Roger, as they signified that no quarter would be given, meaning no mercy would be shown to the captured crew. If pirates raised the red flag, it was a signal that they intended to kill everyone aboard the enemy ship. Different pirate captains had their own variations of the Jolly Roger. Blackbeard's flag, for example, featured a skeleton holding an hourglass in one hand and a spear in the other, piercing a bleeding heart. This gruesome image was a reminder that time was running out for Blackbeard's enemies. Calico Jack Rackham, on the other hand, flew a simpler design of a skull with crossed swords, a straightforward but equally intimidating symbol. While the black and red flags were the most recognizable, pirates often used deception in their attacks. They might initially fly the flag of a friendly nation, luring merchant ships into a false sense of security. Once they were close enough to attack, they would raise the Jolly Roger, sending a wave of terror through their unsuspecting prey. This tactic allowed pirates to get within firing range without alerting the enemy to their true intentions until it was too late. Beyond the psychological impact of the flags, the design and construction of pirate ships reflected their specific needs. Pirates would often add extra guns to their ships, ensuring they had more firepower than the average merchant vessel. They also modified their ships to hold larger crews, as pirate raids required manpower both to fight and to operate the ship after it had been taken over. Unlike naval ships, where the captain had absolute authority, pirate ships operated more democratically. Crews had a say in how the ship was run, and many decisions, including the election of the captain, were made collectively. This sense of equality helped foster loyalty among pirate crews, who were often more motivated and cohesive than the sailors aboard merchant ships. In battle, pirates relied on a combination of speed, surprise, and sheer intimidation. Their ships, though often smaller than those of their enemies, were designed for quick, aggressive attacks. Pirates would use their superior knowledge of local waters to outmaneuver larger naval vessels, often escaping into shallow bays or hidden coves where warships couldn't follow. When engaging in combat, pirates used grappling hooks and boarding tactics, preferring to take their enemies alive so they could loot the ship's valuable cargo. Despite their brutal reputation, pirates valued their ships above all else, and the care they put into maintaining them reflected their dependence on these vessels for survival. A pirate's ship was not only their primary means of attack, but also their sanctuary, their home on the unpredictable seas. As the Golden Age of Piracy came to an end, many of these infamous ships were captured or destroyed by naval forces determined to bring law and order to the high seas. However, the image of the pirate ship, with its black flag flying defiantly, remains one of the most enduring symbols of the pirate life, representing freedom, rebellion, and the pursuit of fortune. Pirate codes and governance, democracy on the high seas. Contrary to the image of pirates as chaotic, lawless outlaws, the pirate crews of the Golden Age of Piracy often operated under surprisingly strict and structured systems of governance. Pirates developed their own codes of conduct, creating communities that were far more democratic and egalitarian than the naval or merchant ships of their time. These pirate codes ensured that every crew member had a voice, wealth was distributed more equally, and decisions were made collectively. At the heart of this pirate governance system was the pirate code or articles, a set of rules agreed upon by the entire crew before setting out on a voyage. Every pirate crew had its own version of the code, but they all followed similar principles of fairness and accountability. Unlike in the rigid hierarchies of the British or Spanish navies, where captains had absolute authority and common sailors had little say, pirate crews operated more like a democracy. They elected their captains and could even vote to remove them if they were unhappy with their leadership. The role of a pirate captain was different from that of a naval captain. While naval captains ruled with an iron fist, pirate captains were chosen for their leadership abilities and their skill in battle. Captains only held authority during times of combat or crisis, when decisive action was needed. In everyday matters, however, the crew often had more power than the captain. Pirate crews were highly democratic in their decision-making processes, holding regular votes on important issues such as where to sail, whom to attack, and how to divide the plunder. One of the most well-known pirate captains who operated under this system was Bartholomew Roberts, also known as Blackbeard. Roberts' code was strict but fair, outlining the duties of each crew member and specifying punishments for breaking the rules. For instance, in Roberts' code, gambling was forbidden aboard the ship, and lights had to be extinguished by 8 o'clock each night to maintain order. Despite these restrictions, Roberts' code also ensured that all crew members were entitled to an equal share of the loot, with the captain and officers receiving slightly larger portions as a reward for their leadership. One of the key principles of pirate governance was the equal division of plunder. After a successful raid, the spoils were divided among the crew, with the captain and officers receiving a larger share, but every pirate still earned more than they would have as sailors in a traditional navy or merchant fleet. This equitable distribution of wealth was one of the reasons so many men, and some women, were drawn to the pirate life. In a world where most people lived in poverty, piracy offered a chance at riches and a level of equality that was unheard of on land. Pirate codes also included provisions for compensating injured crew members, an early form of workers' compensation. Pirates who lost limbs or sustained serious injuries during battle were entitled to larger shares of the loot as a way of ensuring that they would be taken care of even if they could no longer fight. For example, Blackbeard Roberts' code stated that a pirate who lost an arm or leg in battle would receive 800 pieces of 8 as compensation. This system of support helped maintain crew loyalty and ensured that pirates were willing to risk their lives in battle, knowing that they would be compensated if they were injured. Pirates also had strict rules about discipline, though these were enforced by the crew rather than the captain. Mutiny, desertion, and theft from fellow pirates were considered serious offenses and could be punished by marooning, abandoning the offender on a deserted island, or even death. However, pirate justice was often seen as more just and fair than the often arbitrary punishments meted out by naval or colonial authorities. Decisions about punishment were made by a pirate council, in which all crew members had a vote. Another unique aspect of pirate governance was the election of other important roles aboard the ship, such as the quartermaster. The quartermaster was responsible for dividing the loot, ensuring that the pirate code was enforced, and representing the interests of the crew in disputes with the captain. In many ways, the quartermaster was more powerful than the captain in day-to-day operations, as he was the one who handled the crew's grievances and maintained order. Pirate ships were also far more diverse than most naval or merchant vessels of the time. Many pirates were former slaves or indentured servants who had escaped their oppressive conditions, and pirate ships offered them a rare chance at freedom and equality. On a pirate ship, a man's race or social background mattered far less than his skill and loyalty to the crew. As a result, pirate crews were often made up of men from all over the world, Africans, Europeans, and indigenous peoples, all working together as equals under the pirate code. While these pirate codes and democratic practices may seem unusual for the time, they were born out of necessity. Life at sea was harsh and dangerous, and pirates understood that their survival depended on unity, discipline, and mutual respect. By creating their own rules and electing their own leaders, pirate crews ensured that every member had a stake in the success of the voyage. This sense of shared purpose helped maintain loyalty and prevented mutinies, which were far more common on naval and merchant ships. However, the egalitarian nature of pirate governance did not mean that pirates were free from conflict. Disputes over loot, leadership, and strategy were common, but they were typically resolved through debate and voting rather than violence. Pirate ships were highly organized and operated more like floating republics than the chaotic free-for-all that many imagine. As the Golden Age of Piracy came to an end, many of these codes and systems faded into history. Treasure and plunder, the pursuit of wealth. For many pirates of the Golden Age, the promise of unimaginable wealth was the ultimate goal. The allure of treasure, gold, silver, jewels, and other valuable cargo drove these outlaws to risk their lives and defy the powerful naval forces that patrolled the seas. While tales of hidden treasure and buried chests have become a staple of pirate lore, the reality of pirate plunder was often more complex, involving not only precious metals but also everyday goods and commodities that could be sold for a profit. Pirates targeted ships that carry valuable cargo, and during the 17th and 18th centuries, the seas were filled with merchant vessels transporting goods between Europe, the Americas, and the East. Spanish treasure fleets, in particular, were a prime target for pirates. These fleets carried vast amounts of gold and silver mined from the colonies in the New World, particularly from Peru and Mexico, back to Spain. The Spanish Main, a term used to describe the coastal regions of the Caribbean and the Spanish territories in Central and South America, became a hunting ground for pirates looking to intercept these treasure-laden ships. One of the most sought-after treasures was the Pieces of 8, a Spanish silver coin that was widely used across Europe and the Americas. These coins became a symbol of pirate wealth and were often the primary currency used in pirate transactions. A single successful raid on a Spanish galleon could make a pirate crew rich for life, and the promise of such treasure was enough to inspire pirates to take on great risks. However, gold and silver weren't the only valuable items pirates plundered. Sugar, tobacco, spices, and rum were also highly prized. These goods were in high demand in Europe, and pirates could sell them for a significant profit in black markets across the Caribbean and American colonies. In fact, many pirate raids focused on capturing merchant ships carrying these everyday goods, which were easier to find and often more profitable than hunting for treasure fleets. The pirates would then take their loot to pirate havens like Nassau or Tortuga, where they could sell the goods to local traders and merchants who were more than willing to deal in stolen cargo. The division of loot was an important part of pirate life, governed by strict rules outlined in the Pirate Code. After a successful raid, the plunder was divided equally among the crew, with the captain and officers receiving a larger share as a reward for their leadership. Pirates valued fairness, and the equal distribution of wealth was one of the factors that set pirate crews apart from the highly unequal societies they had often fled. Every pirate had a stake in the success of a raid, and this shared sense of purpose helped maintain unity among the crew. Pirates were also known for their generosity towards injured crew members. If a pirate was wounded in battle or lost a limb, they were compensated with a larger share of the loot to ensure they could survive if they were no longer able to fight. This system of compensation was another way pirates looked after each other, ensuring that loyalty and bravery were rewarded. Despite the romantic image of pirates burying their treasure on remote islands, the reality was often quite different. Most pirates spent their loot as quickly as they acquired it, indulging in lavish lifestyles whenever they returned to their safe havens. Taverns, gambling houses, and brothels in pirate strongholds like Port Royal and Nassau thrived on the wealth brought in by pirate crews. It was not uncommon for pirates to squander their fortunes in just a few weeks, only to return to the seas in search of more plunder. The fleeting nature of pirate wealth contributed to the constant need for new raids and adventures. Some of the most legendary stories of pirate treasure involve vast fortunes that were never found. Captain William Kidd, for example, was rumored to have buried treasure along the coast of New York or on various Caribbean islands. His infamous trial and execution in 1701 only fueled the mystery, and treasure hunters have been searching for his hidden loot ever since. The myth of buried treasure, while largely fictional, has persisted throughout history, contributing to the enduring mystique of pirate lore. One of the most famous treasure myths is that of Blackbeard's hidden gold. Though Blackbeard was known to have amassed significant wealth during his pirate career, much of his treasure was never recovered after his death in 1718. Legends claim that Blackbeard buried his loot on island, but despite centuries of searching, no trace of his treasure has ever been found. These tales of lost riches continue to inspire adventurers and treasure hunters to this day. Pirates not only sought wealth for themselves, but also undermined the powerful empires that controlled the world's trade routes. By attacking merchant ships and stealing their cargo, pirates disrupted the flow of goods and resources, particularly in the Caribbean and Atlantic. This defiance against the established order, combined with their rebellious nature, gave pirates a certain romantic appeal as anti-authority figures, even though their actions were often brutal. In the end, the pursuit of wealth was the driving force behind much of the piracy during the Golden Age. For many, it was a chance to escape the grinding poverty and harsh conditions of life on land or aboard naval ships. The riches of the New World were tantalizingly close, and for a brief moment, pirates held the power to seize that wealth and live by their own rules. However, for most pirates, this wealth was fleeting. Just as quickly as they rose to power, they often met a violent end or were captured and hanged. But the stories of pirate plunder and treasure, both real and imagined, continue to captivate the imagination. The pirate hunters, the Royal Navy, and privateers. As piracy spread across the Caribbean and the Atlantic during the Golden Age of Piracy, the rising threat to global trade routes could no longer be ignored. European powers, especially Britain, Spain, and France, recognized that the lawlessness of the seas not only endangered their wealth but also their authority. In response, these nations launched a fierce campaign to hunt down and eliminate pirates, using both official naval forces and private individuals known as privateers. The Royal Navy played a central role in this anti-piracy campaign, deploying warships to patrol pirate-infested waters and protect merchant vessels. By the early 18th century, the British government had grown increasingly alarmed by the damage pirates were inflicting on the economy. Pirate raids on shipping were costing the empire millions of pounds, and the rise of pirate strongholds, such as Nassau in the Bahamas, threatened to turn the Caribbean into a pirate-controlled region. To combat this, the Royal Navy established a permanent presence in the Caribbean, with a particular focus on the West Indies, where piracy was at its height. Naval captains were given orders to capture or kill pirates on sight, and the British government began offering bounties for the heads of notorious pirate captains. Pirates like Blackbeard, Charles Vane, and Calico Jack became the primary targets of these pirate hunters. The Royal Navy's superior firepower and well-trained crews often outmatched pirate vessels, which were typically smaller and less heavily armed. However, pirates were skilled at evading capture, using the Caribbean's maze of islands and hidden coves to escape pursuit. One of the most successful pirate hunters of the era was Captain Woodes Rogers, who was appointed governor of the Bahamas in 1718 with the specific mission of eradicating piracy from the region. Rogers was a former privateer himself, with first-hand experience in naval warfare. When he arrived in Nassau, he found a pirate stronghold ruled by outlaws, with no functioning government. Rogers immediately declared martial law and began a campaign to capture or drive out the pirates. His efforts were largely successful, and within a few years, Nassau was firmly under British control, marking the beginning of the end for the pirate republic. Privateers, however, played a more complicated role in the fight against piracy. Privateers were privately owned ships that were granted special licenses, known as letters of marque, by their governments. These letters allowed them to attack and seize enemy ships during times of war, essentially making them legal pirates. In exchange, the privateers would share a portion of the loot with their government. During wars between European powers, privateers were an essential part of naval strategy, disrupting enemy trade and weakening their economies. However, many privateers blurred the line between legal warfare and outright piracy. When wars ended and privateers were no longer needed, some of them continued their raiding activities, turning to piracy full-time. This created a fluid, often ambiguous distinction between pirates and privateers. Figures like Captain Henry Morgan, who began his career as a privateer, operated in this gray area. Morgan became famous for his daring raids on Spanish territories in the Caribbean, including the sacking of Panama City in 1671. Though his actions were often indistinguishable from those of a pirate, he was knighted by the British Crown for his service. This complicated relationship between privateers and pirates made it difficult for governments to control piracy. While privateers helped defend their nation's interests during war, they could just as easily become a threat during peacetime. Many former privateers, such as William Kidd, crossed the line into piracy and were later hunted down by the same governments that had once employed them. In the early 1700s, the British government launched a more aggressive campaign against piracy, offering pardons to pirates willing to give up their life of crime. This initiative, known as the Pirates' Pardon, was a last-ditch effort to bring peace to the seas. Pirates who accepted the pardon were granted amnesty and allowed to reintegrate into society, while those who refused were hunted down relentlessly. Some pirates, like Benjamin Hornigold, took advantage of the pardon and became pirate hunters themselves, using their knowledge of pirate tactics to capture their former comrades. Others, like Charles Vane, rejected the pardon and continued their piratical activities, only to be captured and hanged. Despite these efforts, the hunt for pirates was not always easy. Pirate ships were often faster and more maneuverable than naval vessels, and pirates knew the waters of the Caribbean and Atlantic intimately. They used hidden coves, shallow reefs, and dense mangrove swamps to evade capture. The pirate hunters had to adapt to these tactics, employing local knowledge and informants to track down their quarry. The decline of piracy in the early 18th century was not solely the result of military action. Economic changes also played a significant role. As European powers began to strengthen their control over their colonies and establish more regulated trade routes, the opportunities for piracy diminished. The capture and execution of several high-profile pirates marked the symbolic end of the Golden Age of Piracy. In 1718, Blackbeard was killed in a dramatic battle with British forces off the coast of North Carolina. In 1720, Calico Jack was captured and hanged in Jamaica. The following year, Bartholomew Roberts, one of the most successful pirates of the age, was killed in battle off the coast of West Africa. These defeats, combined with the relentless pursuit of pirate hunters, effectively brought the era of large-scale piracy to a close. Pirate trials, the capture and execution of infamous pirates. As the Golden Age of Piracy began to wane, the once feared pirates of the Caribbean and Atlantic found themselves hunted by powerful naval forces, captured, and brought to justice in the form of public trials and executions. These trials were as much about reasserting control over the seas as they were about setting an example, demonstrating that piracy was no longer a path to freedom and fortune but one that led to the gallows. The trials of infamous pirates became highly publicized events, drawing large crowds eager to witness the downfall of men and women who had once defied the rule of law. One of the most infamous pirate trials was that of Captain William Kidd, a privateer turned pirate who was captured and put on trial in 1701. Kidd's trial was significant because he had originally been commissioned by the British government as a privateer, with the task of attacking enemy ships during times of war. However, when peace was declared, Kidd continued his attacks on merchant vessels, crossing the line into piracy. His trial in London was highly controversial, as many believed that Kidd had been set up by his backers, who distanced themselves from him when his actions became politically inconvenient. Nevertheless, Kidd was convicted of piracy and hanged, his body displayed in an iron cage along the Thames River as a grim warning to other would-be pirates. Another famous trial was that of Stede Bonnet, the so-called gentleman pirate. Born into wealth and privilege, Bonnet was an unlikely pirate, having been a plantation owner before turning to piracy. He sailed with Blackbeard for a time before striking out on his own, though he was never as successful as his more ruthless peers. In 1718, Bonnet was captured by Colonel William Rhett off the coast of South Carolina. His trial was a sensation, as Bonnet's genteel background made his descent into piracy all the more shocking. Despite pleas for clemency, Bonnet was sentenced to death and hanged in Charleston, South Carolina. His execution marked the fall of one of the last major pirate figures of the era. For many pirates, capture often meant a swift and brutal end. After a pirate was caught, they were typically taken to a nearby port to stand trial. Pirate trials were held in places like Port Royal, Jamaica, Boston, and London, where the British Crown sought to reassert its authority over the seas. The trials were often swift, as the evidence against pirates, usually testimonies from captured merchant ship crews or naval officers, was damning. Pirates who were found guilty were sentenced to hang, a punishment meant to serve as a deterrent to others considering a life of piracy. One of the most notorious pirate trials involved Calico Jack Rackham, alongside his infamous crew members, and Bonny and Mary Red. Rackham was captured in 1720 by the British Navy off the coast of Jamaica, after a brief but bold career of piracy. Rackham's trial was notable not just because of his own infamy, but because of the presence of Bonny and Mary Red, two of the few female pirates known to history. Both women had fought fiercely alongside the male crew during the capture, with accounts stating they were more fearsome in battle than many of their male counterparts. While Rackham was swiftly convicted and hanged, Bonny and Reed's fate was more complex. Both women pleaded their bellies, meaning they were pregnant at the time, which spared them from immediate execution. Mary Red died in prison from illness, but Bonny's ultimate fate remains a mystery, with some legends claiming she escaped or was secretly pardoned. One of the most significant trials of the Golden Age was the trial of Bartholomew Roberts' crew in 1722. Roberts, also known as Black Bart, had been one of the most successful and feared pirates of the era, capturing hundreds of ships off the coast of West Africa. After his death in battle, 52 of his crew members were captured by the British and put on trial in Cape Coast Castle, a British fort in what is now Ghana. The trial was one of the largest pirate trials in history, with over 70 pirates standing before the court. Many of Roberts' men were hanged, and the trial sent a clear message that the British Empire would no longer tolerate piracy on the high seas. The executions themselves were public spectacles, often carried out in places like Execution Dock in London or in the town squares of major Caribbean ports. The bodies of hanged pirates were sometimes left on display in gibbets, iron cages where the dead were left to rot as a warning to others. These grim displays, such as Blackbeard's severed head, which was hung from the bow of a British ship, were intended to strike fear into the hearts of anyone considering a life of piracy. Pirate trials also provided an opportunity for the ruling governments to reassert their authority. For decades, pirates had operated with relative impunity, carving out independent territories and governing themselves by their own codes. By publicly trying and executing pirates, the British and other colonial powers re-established their control over the seas and sent a strong signal that the age of pirate rule was over. While the trials marked the end of the Golden Age of Piracy, they also helped cement the legendary status of many pirates. Stories of their exploits, their defiance in the face of death, and their often dramatic court appearances became the basis for much of the pirate lore that continues to captivate audiences today. The execution of these pirates, though intended as a deterrent, did not fully erase their romanticized image. Even as the pirate threat diminished, the stories of their daring adventures and their resistance to authority lived on. Pirate trials, with their high drama and notorious defendants, became part of the enduring legacy of the Golden Age of Piracy, forever tying the fate of these outlaws to both history and legend. The end of the Golden Age, suppression of piracy. The Golden Age of Piracy, which saw outlaws ruling the high seas, was destined to come to an end. By the early 18th century, European powers were growing increasingly determined to eliminate piracy, which had become a major threat to global trade. The combined forces of naval power, changing economics, and strategic reforms led to the decline of piracy and the eventual suppression of the pirate strongholds that had once flourished in the Caribbean, Atlantic, and beyond. One of the primary reasons for the suppression of piracy was the increasing pressure from European governments, particularly Britain, whose global trade routes were under constant attack. As the British Empire expanded its influence in the Americas and the West Indies, it became crucial to protect merchant vessels carrying goods between Europe, the colonies, and Africa. The rise of piracy was disrupting commerce and draining the resources of colonial powers, forcing them to take decisive action. To reassert their dominance over the seas, governments ramped up efforts to hunt down and eliminate pirate threats. The Royal Navy played a central role in this campaign. By the early 1700s, the British Navy had become one of the most powerful maritime forces in the world, and they began deploying warships to patrol pirate-infested waters in the Caribbean and along the American coast. These patrols were far more frequent and better organized than in previous decades, making it increasingly difficult for pirates to operate freely. Naval ships, with their superior firepower and larger crews, were able to outmatch pirate vessels in open combat, forcing many pirates to either flee or face capture. The British government also took measures to cut off the pirate supply lines and dismantle their strongholds. One of the key steps in this effort was the appointment of Woodes Rogers as governor of the Bahamas in 1718. Nassau, the capital of New Providence, had become a notorious pirate haven, home to some of the most infamous figures of the Golden Age, including Blackbeard and Charles Vane. Rogers, a former privateer, was tasked with restoring order to the Bahamas and eradicating piracy from the region. Upon his arrival in Nassau, Rogers declared martial law and launched a crackdown on pirate activity. Pirates were offered the chance to surrender and accept a royal pardon or face the full force of the Royal Navy. The pirates' pardon, as it came to be known, was a crucial turning point in the fight against piracy. The British government realized that offering clemency to pirates could help reduce their numbers without the need for constant military engagements. Many pirates, weary of the dangerous life at sea or eager to avoid execution, accepted the pardon and returned to a lawful existence. Benjamin Hornigold, a former pirate who had sailed with Blackbeard, was one of the notable figures who took advantage of the pardon and even went on to work for the British government as a pirate hunter, using his knowledge of pirate tactics to capture his former comrades. Despite the success of the pardon, not all pirates were willing to give up their way of life. Charles Vane, a defiant and brutal pirate, rejected the pardon and continued his raids. However, His refusal to surrender ultimately led to his capture in 1721 and his execution soon after. Thane's fate was symbolic of the changing tides. Pirates who refused to submit were being systematically hunted down and eliminated. Another key factor in the suppression of piracy was the shift in economic conditions. As European powers began to strengthen their colonial empires and establish more regulated trade routes, the opportunities for piracy diminished. Naval convoys became more common, with merchant ships traveling in groups under the protection of warships. This made it much harder for pirates to attack isolated vessels and forced them to take on heavily armed convoys, which was often a losing battle. At the same time, the colonial economies were becoming more stable, and the need for black market goods that pirates provided began to fade. Pirates also faced increasing resistance from colonial authorities. In the early days of piracy, many colonial governors and officials had been either complicit in pirate activities or indifferent to them, as pirates often brought wealth into local economies. However, as piracy grew more disruptive and threatened the overall stability of the colonies, these same officials began to cooperate with European powers to rid their territories of pirates. In places like Jamaica, South Carolina, and Virginia, local governments worked with the Royal Navy to capture and prosecute pirates. Trials were held in port cities across the Caribbean and the American colonies, with public executions serving as a warning to others considering a life of piracy. By the early 1720s, the most notorious pirate captains had either been killed, captured, or forced into hiding. The deaths of Blackbeard, Calico Jack, and Bartholomew Roberts, three of the most feared pirates of the age, marked the symbolic end of the Golden Age of Piracy. Blackbeard was killed in a dramatic battle off the coast of North Carolina in 1718, while Calico Jack and Roberts were both captured and executed in the early 1720s. With their deaths, the era of large-scale piracy came to a close. In addition to the military and legal measures, changes in technology also contributed to the suppression of piracy. The development of faster and more maneuverable naval vessels made it harder for pirates to escape pursuit. Additionally, improved communication between colonial governments and European powers meant that pirate threats could be dealt with more quickly and effectively. The era of long, drawn-out naval chases was replaced by a more organized and coordinated effort to eradicate piracy from key shipping routes. Piracy and popular culture, from myths to movies. Although the Golden Age of Piracy ended centuries ago, the image of pirates has endured and evolved in popular culture, becoming one of the most romanticized and legendary archetypes in storytelling. From literature and theater to movies, video games, and beyond, the myth of the pirate has captivated generations, blending historical truths with exaggerated fiction and fantasy. One of the earliest depictions of pirates in popular culture can be traced back to Robert Louis Stevenson's classic novel, Treasure Island, first published in 1883. The novel helped establish many of the enduring pirate tropes that we recognize today, including buried treasure, maps marked with an X, parrots perched on pirate shoulders, and the stereotypical pirate vocabulary like R. The character of Long John Silver, a cunning and charismatic pirate, became the template for many pirate figures in fiction that followed. Stevenson's tale painted a thrilling yet dangerous picture of piracy, setting the stage for countless adaptations and reinterpretations in books, plays, and films. Another significant influence on the pirate mythos is J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, first introduced to audiences in 1904 as a stage play. The character of Captain Hook, the villainous pirate captain who relentlessly hunts Peter Pan, became an iconic figure in both children's literature and theater. Hook's flamboyant attire, hook for a hand, and vengeful persona have become staples of pirate stories, particularly in adaptations of Peter Pan for film and television. The Disney animated film Peter Pan, 1953, further popularized Captain Hook, and his character continues to be a symbol of the pirate archetype in pop culture. In cinema, pirates have been portrayed in a variety of ways, from ruthless villains to charming anti-heroes. The Golden Age of Hollywood swashbuckling films in the 1930s and 1940s brought to life charismatic pirate captains and adventurous seafaring tales. Films like Captain Blood, 1935, starring Errol Flynn, and The Sea Hawk, 1940, were famous for their high-action sword fights, daring naval battles, and Flynn's portrayal of the dashing, yet morally ambiguous pirate figure. These films helped solidify the romanticized image of pirates as heroic, if roguish, adventurers who fought for freedom on the open seas. The popularity of pirate-themed media surged once again in the 2000s with the release of the Pirates of the Caribbean film series, starting with The Curse of the Black Pearl in 2003. Johnny Depp's portrayal of Captain Jack Sparrow, a clever and eccentric pirate captain, became an instant pop culture sensation. Jack Sparrow's unpredictable, witty, and sometimes chaotic nature reinvigorated the pirate genre for modern audiences. The film series, which blends elements of fantasy, history, and myth, brought the world of piracy back into the mainstream, cementing pirates as both charming anti-heroes and supernatural figures. The films drew inspiration from real pirate lore, such as Blackbeard and the myth of the Flying Dutchman, while also contributing new ideas to the pirate genre. Beyond literature and film, pirates have also been a major presence in video games, where players can take on the role of pirate captains, navigating the seas, plundering ships, and searching for treasure. Games like Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag, 2013, brought an immersive pirate experience to players, allowing them to engage in naval battles, explore pirate havens like Nassau, and interact with historical figures from the Golden Age of Piracy. The game blended historical events with fantastical elements, much like the film industry, creating a sense of adventure and intrigue around the pirate life. The depiction of pirates in popular culture is not always historically accurate, but it has helped to shape how people view the pirate lifestyle. While real pirates were often brutal and violent, popular culture has romanticized them as symbols of freedom, rebellion, and adventure. Pirate characters are frequently portrayed as misunderstood rogues, individuals who reject authority and seek independence on the high seas. This portrayal speaks to a deep cultural fascination with the idea of living outside the law, free from societal constraints, and following one's own code. The Jolly Roger, the famous skull and crossbones flag, is another element of pirate culture that has been widely adopted in modern media. Once a symbol of terror, the Jolly Roger has become a widely recognized emblem in pop culture, representing pirates in everything from cartoons to sports teams. The flag is often used to convey a sense of danger, rebellion, or lawlessness, while also being tied to the romantic image of the pirate as a daring adventurer. Pirate festivals and reenactment events have also sprung up around the world, allowing fans of pirate culture to dress up, participate in mock battles, and celebrate the swashbuckling lifestyle. Cities like Tampa, Florida, with its Gasparilla Pirate Festival, and Hampton, Virginia, with its Blackbeard Pirate Festival, attract thousands of visitors each year who come to embrace the fun and fantasy of pirate life. These events celebrate not just the history of piracy but also the larger-than-life myths and legends that have grown around it. In modern literature, television, and film, pirates continue to evolve as complex characters. Shows like Black Sails, 2014 to 2017, a prequel to Treasure Island, portray pirates as morally ambiguous figures, blending the brutal realities of pirate life with the romanticized myths. This series explores the politics, economics, and alliances of the pirate world, offering a more nuanced view of pirates as both dangerous criminals and oppressed individuals fighting against colonial powers. Despite the end of piracy's golden age, the fascination with pirates endures. Pirates represent more than just thieves on the seas. They embody the human desire for freedom, adventure, and rebellion against oppressive systems. As we come to the end of our whispered journey through the golden age of piracy, from the treacherous seas to the infamous captains who ruled them, I hope you've enjoyed exploring this fascinating period of history. The stories of Blackbeard and Bonny and their legendary peers continue to captivate our imaginations, reminding us of the rebellious spirit and adventure that defined this era. Thank you for joining me as we uncover the mysteries of pirates, their hidden treasures, and their ultimate downfall. If you found this journey interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss a whispered tale. I look forward to sharing more historical adventures with you soon. Until next time, may your dreams be filled with the mysteries of the high seas.